Have you ever stopped to think that you might have been deceived today and didn't even realize it? Or worse, that you may have lied to yourself without wanting to admit it? Lying is not an isolated accident. It is a force that crosses cultures, shapes relationships, corrodes institutions, and hides in the details of our daily lives. Every human being lies. In small, casual phrases or in elaborate webs of deceit, we carry this ability as an invisible part of our nature. And the most frightening part, many times we lie without even noticing. What leads us to hide the truth? What turns us into architects of distorted realities? What if lying weren't just a moral failing, but an instinctive necessity engraved in our very survival code? From ancient myths, with their trickster gods, to modern social media, the language of the liar reveals deep fears, unconfessable desires, and conflicts that few dare to face. Ignoring this is like walking in the dark, hoping that the light comes from outside. But those who learn to see the hidden gears of lies, in others and in themselves, awaken to a new way of seeing the world. Since the dawn of humanity, lying has manifested as an almost mythical ability. No culture has remained untouched by this art of distorting reality. The oldest myths already portrayed characters who lived by cunning and deceit. The trickster, present in traditions as distinct as those of Native American, Norse, and African peoples, is the figure that illustrates this ambiguous facet of existence. At times creator, at times destroyer, at times hero, at times villain. Loki, in Norse mythology, masterfully embodies this archetype. Cunning, versatile, manipulative. He doesn't lie just for personal gain. His trickery is almost a force of nature, defying the established order. On the other side of the world, we find Anansi, the spider trickster from African cultures, who uses intelligence and eloquence to overcome challenges that brute strength could never defeat. These characters didn't emerge by chance. They reflect an uncomfortable truth. The ability to deceive is an inseparable part of human survival. In ancient times, knowing when to withhold information or distort perceptions could mean the difference between life and death. Lying, then, was not just an ethical deviation, it was a tool for adaptation. Even in great historical epics, such as Homer's Iliad, lying appears as a strategy of war, where honor and betrayal are intertwined. The Trojan horse, one of the greatest symbols of human cunning, was a lie in the form of a gift. These examples show us that lying is not an isolated flaw of character, but a deep component of the human experience. Ignoring it is ignoring an essential part of who we are. Perhaps that's why, even today, we are still fascinated and terrified by it. Lying is never an isolated act. Behind every distortion of the truth, there is a specific motivation, a need that, most of the time, the liar himself may not be able to see. We don't lie just to deceive others. Often, we lie to protect ourselves. In dangerous situations, lying can be an instinctive response of self. A child who lies to avoid punishment has learned early on that the truth sometimes carries to higher cost. This reaction extends into adult life, omitting mistakes at work, hiding feelings in a relationship, manipulating small narratives to avoid judgment. All of this is, above all, a mechanism of social survival. But lies are also used for gain, to achieve status, approval, financial advantages. And in this game, the line between cleverness and corruption becomes dangerously thin. Society often rewards the ability to play with the truth, creating environments where being honest seems naive. Curiously, not all lies stem from selfishness. Some arise from empathy. Who has never softened a truth to spare someone suffering? Sometimes, lying seems like an act of love, although deep down, it is also a way of controlling the other's pain, and, by extension, our own. In more extreme cases, lying becomes pathological. There are those who lie without apparent reason, compulsively. In these cases, lying is no longer a tool, but a prison. The individual loses the ability to distinguish what is real, even for themselves. Looking at these motivations is to realize that lying is not just morally condemnable or justifiable. It is, above all, a mirror that reveals what we are trying to protect, achieve, or hide from ourselves and from others. Ever since humanity learned to lie, it has also relentlessly sought ways to catch lies in the act. Ancient methods of detection were often brutal and symbolic. In medieval societies, the judgment of God was common. The accused would place their hand in boiling water or carry red-hot iron. If the wound healed quickly, they were considered innocent. The logic was simple and terrifying. Only someone protected by the gods would be spared. Over the centuries, humanity tried to make lie detection more scientific. In the early 20th century, the first lie detectors, polygraphs, emerged. They measure physiological changes such as heart rate, blood pressure, and respiration, based on the premise that the body reacts involuntarily when lying. Although popular in films and interrogations, these methods have been criticized for their inaccuracy. After all, nervousness is not an exclusive sign of guilt. Today, more sophisticated techniques analyze speech itself. Language scholars identify subtle patterns, evasions, excessive justifications, unnecessary details, or even emotional distance in words. For example, a liar might avoid using personal pronouns to distance themselves from the narrative, saying a mistake was made instead of I made a mistake. Artificial intelligence has also joined the battle, creating algorithms that detect inconsistencies in statements or changes in tone of voice. But no matter how advanced the technologies are, an uncomfortable truth remains. Detecting a lie with absolute certainty continues to be an almost impossible task. The human mind is far too complex, and the truth often hides precisely in what seems most convincing. And in the end, perhaps the quest for an infallible, lie-detecting machine reveals more about our own fear of being betrayed than about the actual effectiveness of these tools. Lying is not just an individual choice. It is a force capable of corroding entire structures. On a personal level, lying erodes trust, the invisible cement that holds relationships together. A small betrayal, a strategic omission, a poorly kept secret. All of this, little by little, creates deep cracks between people who once fully trusted each other. And if a single lie can shake a relationship, imagine the multiplied effect in communities, organizations, and governments. Political scandals, corporate fraud, media manipulation. These are examples of how institutionalized lying destroys what should uphold life in society: credibility. When institutions lie, the impact is devastating. It's not just about financial losses or damaged reputations. It's about the breakdown of the social pact. If justice is not trustworthy, if the press manipulates, if leaders lie blatantly, what is left to the individual but cynicism and apathy? Systemic lying creates an environment where the truth is no longer sought and distrust becomes the norm. This phenomenon is not new. From corruption in the Roman Empire to manipulations by modern corporations, history bears witness to how lying, when widespread, implodes civilizations from within. No social structure can withstand the long term when the truth is constantly sacrificed. That's why understanding the impact of lies, big and small, is more than an ethical issue. It's a matter of collective survival. Ignoring this dynamic is accepting to live in ruins without realizing that the collapse has already begun. Since the earliest philosophers, lying has sparked heated debates about what is morally acceptable. For some, lying is always an ethical violation, with no exceptions. For others, context can transform it into something, if not virtuous, at least understandable. Ethical absolutism, advocated by thinkers like Immanuel Kant, holds that lying is intrinsically wrong in all circumstances. Kant argued that by lying, we destroy the very foundation of human trust, something essential for coexistence. For him, even lying to protect someone would be condemnable, as it would create dangerous loopholes in the rational structure of society. On the other side, contextualists see lying with more nuance. A classic example is hiding fugitives during wartime. Here, lying would not only be justifiable, but perhaps a moral duty. This view acknowledges that in extreme situations, preserving life or avoiding greater harm may be more important than blind adherence to a rule. In everyday life, most of us navigate between these two perspectives. We lie to avoid hurting someone, to escape punishments we consider unfair, or to protect our privacy. However, the line between what is necessary and what is merely convenient can easily blur. This tension reveals an uncomfortable truth. There may not be a simple ethical code when it comes to lying. Every choice to distort or reveal the truth carries weight and consequences, and forces us to deal with the responsibility for what we choose not to show. The big question is, who do we become when we justify our lies? And what is the real cost, both internal and external, of each small truth we omit? In the digital world, lying has found fertile ground to grow at an unprecedented scale and speed. If once a lie had to travel by word of mouth, today it spreads instantly, crossing continents in seconds. Social media, algorithms, and information bubbles have created an ecosystem where truth often competes at a disadvantage. Fake news is a clear example of this. Created with an appearance of truth, it manipulates emotions, reinforces prejudices, and shapes opinions without the individual realizing it. This is not just harmless misinformation. These digital lies have the power to influence elections, cause panic, and divide entire communities. The online environment favors lying because, in it, reach is more important than accuracy. The logic of clicks, likes, and shares rewards what is shocking, provocative, emotional, even if it's false. And since many people get their information only from what appears on their timelines, the lie becomes solidified before the truth even gets a chance to be heard. Worse still, manipulation is no longer just the work of ill-intentioned individuals. Platforms, companies, and governments use data and behavioral psychology to steer narratives, reinforcing belief bubbles that isolate people from opposing viewpoints. In this new scenario, the responsibility to seek the truth falls even more on the individual. It's not enough to consume information. One must doubt, investigate, deconstruct, because if we're not vigilant, we will live surrounded by fabricated versions of reality, unable to discern what truly matters. Digital lying is not just a virtual phenomenon. It shapes how we think, feel, and act in the real world. And its influence will continue to grow unless we learn to resist the seduction of what merely comforts and begin to pursue what truly matters. If lying is so prevalent, Honesty cannot be treated as something spontaneous. It needs to be cultivated, taught, reinforced. And this starts long before adulthood. From childhood, small choices and examples shape a person's relationship with the truth. Teaching honesty goes beyond imposing rules. It's about showing, through consistent actions, that the truth has value, even when it's uncomfortable. A child who sees adults distorting facts to get out of difficult situations quickly learns that lying is not only acceptable but functional. Example always speaks louder than words. In formal education, cultivating honesty requires more than punishing plagiarism or cheating on tests. It's necessary to create environments where mistakes are treated as learning opportunities, not as sources of shame. Only when truth is not met with humiliation will someone feel safe choosing it. In institutions, building honesty requires real transparency, not just slogans. Companies and governments that practice what they preach create cultures of trust where truth can flourish. When the environment values integrity, individuals also feel called to act with greater responsibility. On a personal level, cultivating honesty is a daily practice. Observing oneself in small omissions, easy justifications, social disguises. Being honest isn't just about telling the truth to others, but also having the courage to recognize it within oneself, even when it reveals our vulnerabilities. Honesty, like courage, is a slow construction made of many discrete acts, and in the end, it is not just a moral duty, it is the only bridge between who we are and who we want to be. Lying to others can be a conscious choice, but lying to oneself is a more subtle, more dangerous, and paradoxically more common process. Self-deception is that inner voice that softens errors, justifies questionable choices, builds comforting narratives to avoid the weight of reality. It's easy to spot lies in others. Much harder is seeing them within ourselves. How many times have you caught yourself saying, "It wasn't that bad, it was for a good cause," or "I had no choice"? These small concessions form an invisible web that, over time, traps the individual in repetitive behavior patterns. Psychology explains that self-deception serves to protect the ego from pains that seem unbearable. Guilt, shame, fear of failure. We create edited versions of our own story to keep our self-esteem minimally intact. The problem is that these versions, though comforting in the short term, push us further and further from reality, and thus from any real possibility of change or growth. This also has deep side effects. It deteriorates relationships, sabotages dreams, undermines true self-confidence. Because, deep down, we always know, even if vaguely, that we are running from the truth, and that subconscious awareness generates anxiety, insecurity, and a persistent sense of disconnection. Looking at one's own capacity to lie to oneself is no easy task. It requires courage to dismantle comforting stories and face the complexity of one's own soul. But only by breaking with self-deception can space open for a more authentic, freer, more deeply truthful life. Lying, in all its forms, is a shadow that accompanies human existence. It's in the stories we tell, the institutions we create, the masks we wear to socially survive, and often in the very narratives we repeat to ourselves. Ignoring this phenomenon would be like refusing to see half of reality. Understanding the language of the liar, both in others and within oneself, is an act of lucidity. And more than that, it is an invitation to live with greater awareness. It's not about seeking unattainable purity, but about cultivating an intimate commitment to the truth, the one that often hurts, but also liberates. The path to this transformation begins in the everyday, in each small choice for honesty, in each dismantling of an automatic excuse, in each conversation where one dares to be real. In institutions, it means creating environments that reward integrity and discourage cynicism. In education, it means teaching that making mistakes is human, but running from the truth robs us of the chance to learn. Looking at lies is, in fact, an act of hope, because only those who see the shadow can, at last, choose to walk toward the light. And that choice, however quiet, has the power to change everything. If you enjoyed this content and want to understand more about life's questions, subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who is also one of the awakened.